Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22K year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity //equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen, and we haven't really talked since yesterday. My girlfriend and I have been dating the past 5 years, since college. After graduation, we were semi-long distance, living close enough that we alternately visited almost every weekend. In 2018, and got a job in my city, and we found a place and moved in together. Now's a good time to mention the security cameras in our house. Break-ins are unfortunately common where we live. We thus got some motion-activated cameras, one of which has a view of our kitchen, to monitor the back door. The cameras only record when there's motion so they can retain footage for a very long time. And of course knows this about a year ago, and started complaining I wasn't contributing equally to chores. I've been obsessive about chores my whole life. Growing up, not doing the dishes meant no video games for a week. When I lived with roommates, I was always the chore Nazi, making damn sure we all stuck to our chore wheel. And is just as fastidious about chores, so we just naturally alternated who did what. I'd just been brushing her remarks off, but over the last few months they've become much more aggressive. E.g. I was vacuuming and said, "Look at you finally cleaning up around here." I replied that we alternated vacuuming, to which she retorted, "No, you've vacuumed maybe twice since I moved in." Exchanges like this have been happening so frequently that I began to doubt my own recollection. Am I not as clean as I thought? Finally, she exploded at me last week. She said that having to stay home constantly over the past weeks exposed how little I do around the house, and that she didn't move in just to be my maid. Questioning my own sanity, I spent a few hours going through the entire 1.5-year archive of security camera footage, and tallied the exact number of times the kitchen cam caught each of us doing dishes. Our cleaning supplies, vacuum, mop, etc., are in the kitchen pantry, so I also tallied up how many times we grabbed cleaning stuff. To my vindication, the tally showed that we indeed split chores equally. She vacuumed / mopped 5 more times than I did. I did dishes 20 more times than she did. Given that we vacuum / mop at least once a week and do dishes at least every day. These are insignificant differences over the year and a half we've lived together. When I confronted Anne, she shrugged off her behavior as remembering things differently, but the real sin here was what I did, which she called an unforgivable violation of her privacy, akin to abusive stalking. She has broken up with me and is trying to move out, although obviously this is difficult due to current circumstances. I'm totally heartbroken, and was the love of my life, and I can't believe she destroyed our relationship like this. To make matters worse, she told many of our friends, who are mostly siding with her. They've been texting me that what I did was creepy, abusive, controlling, invasive, etc. I'm at a loss. I'm beginning to think I'm the one who's off base here. In the past month, my older brother's fiancée left him. This meant he lost his house because the home they lived in was in her name. He lost his vehicle because what he was driving was her old car. He also lost his job because he was so focused on his breakup that he was constantly making mistakes. He moved in with our parents, who live about 5 minutes away from my husband and I. I do have a lot of sympathy for him. He literally has nothing, no home, no car, no job, no relationship. The problem is, this is 3rd time this has happened to him. That's right, he has had 3 fiancées leave him now, and every time he winds up losing everything. He has had 2 cars impounded because he gets so upset over his breakups he loses his job and can't make payments on his vehicles. My parents and I have bailed him out of these situations every time. I even paid off his back payments on his car, paid for his dog's vet bills, and paid some of his rent before. My parents and I have literally spent thousands of dollars trying to help him. Each of the past 2 times he winds up moving back in with my parents, who are in their late 60s. While we pay for everything for him, whenever he goes through a breakup he becomes a total jerk. He spends every weekend with his friends out camping or vacationing. How he pays for it I have no idea. After the 2nd fiancé he took a trip to Fiji with his friends but couldn't afford to pay his rent. He mostly ignores me unless he needs money, which, during this breakup, I am refusing to help him out at all. The worst part is he treats my parents like garbage. If they ask him questions like, "Have you been looking for a job?" he will yell at them. He has no problem eating the food they provide for him and living in their house rent and utility free. And driving my mom's brand new car, which she got because he totaled her last car, but makes them absolutely miserable. My mom told me he will yell at them, call her stupid, trashes their house, sleeps all day, and leaves the care of his dog up to them. Every time I see my mom lately it's obvious that she's been crying. The most recent event took place on Sunday. In an attempt to get him out of the house for a while, I offered to take him out in our boat. He seemed super excited about it, and when he's excited he can actually be a lot of fun to be around. He tells me he's hanging out with friends but will be back in town Sunday afternoon. Sunday afternoon rolls around and he's nowhere to be seen. I get a text around 6 p.m. that he's decided to go to a local tourist destination with all his friends. They are going to tube down a river. I'm bummed because I was honestly looking forward to it, and because my brother has once again chosen his friends over his family. But it's whatever, I honestly don't rely on him for anything, so it's not that big of deal. But then I find out he's driving my mom's car and she has to be in her office early Monday morning. Then the peaceful protests in our town turn into full-on riots and my brother is still not home. At this point he can't get home because they've blocked off access to our town, so he just stays with his friends, and I wind up taking my mom to work. My dad tries to talk to my brother on Monday about how irresponsible he was, and my brother just yells at him, and then locks himself in my parents' basement for the rest of the day. My parents are miserable. They want to help and have always said they will do anything for us kids. But they are just enabling my brother every time they bail him out. My dad has major health problems that are being exacerbated by the stress my brother is causing. My mom has a history of severe depression that I see her slipping back into the longer my brother is with them. I'm really close to my parents and they are usually very fun people. The longer my brother stays with them, I am seeing them become depressed, short-tempered, and miserable. I tried telling them to kick him out. One of his friends would surely take him in. But they insist that they don't want to leave him homeless. I can't convince them to kick them out, but is there anything else I can say or do that might get my brother to get his head out his ass and get a job? How can I get my brother to see his behavior towards my parents is unacceptable? It just sucks. I used to really look up to my older brother because he is outgoing and funny and the sort of person everyone just gravitates towards. Now I'm just pissed at him for how he treats my parents and simultaneously scared for his mental health, because he clearly has a lot of problems. I am 18 years old male, I'm a high school senior and proposal season is currently in full swing. I was in my AP Chem class when suddenly an entourage of people entered my classroom with a disabled girl. She has cerebral palsy, that I know. I first saw the posters and the bouquet of flowers she was holding and thought, "Aww, that's sweet of her." Then they revealed the posters and I read my name and was completely taken aback. I literally almost had a anxiety attack. I didn't know what to say at all and the entire class was cheering and people even started filming. I was straight up frozen for a minute and I could feel myself burning up with embarrassment. Of course I wanted to say no, but since it was so public and everyone was waiting for me to say yes, I did and hugged her. Everyone clapped including the teacher and I was mortified. One of my buddies asked me if I was okay. Afterwards, since apparently I looked like I was gonna burst into tears, and I told him I literally did not expect that at all, and I didn't want to say yes. He suggested that I go find her after school or something and explain that to her and I agreed. Now, this girl is really nice. We had a class together last year and sat next to each other for a majority of it and talked quite a lot. I would say we were friends then, but we haven't spoken more than 2 times this school year, so we've definitely drifted apart. That's why I was completely shocked when she sprung the prom asking on me. Usually, people have their friends make sure that the other is at least aware before doing the asking to prevent situations like this. I was contemplating if I should just bite the bullet and go with her, but decided I just couldn't because it is my senior year prom and I was already starting to plan my asking. There's this girl that I've liked for a couple of months now and I recently heard from my friends that she likes me back, so I was gonna ask her. So I ended up going to the special ed classroom after school where I found her and asked if I could speak to her outside. I told her everything and how I really appreciated the gesture. But I was already planning on asking my crush to prom and she was crushed. She started crying really loudly and asked me why I couldn't have just said no, and I said that I didn't want to embarrass the two of us in front of all those people. At this point, one of her aides came out to check on us since she could hear the crying, and the girl told her aide what happened and she straight up glared at me and said, "That's not okay." Now I feel like absolute shit.